from the Ohio Treasurer's Office, and he's going to speak with you about stable accounts.
Well, how are you all doing? I promise, I know I'm short, but I'll get out of the way. My name's Nick. I'm with the State Treasurer's Office, and the State Treasurer's Office here in Ohio administers the Stable Account Program. And so for those that haven't really heard a lot about the program, what the accounts can do is they are a resource shield. So it allows people to be able to save and their families to save so that an individual can continue to save for what they need above their resource limit. And so essentially what we're trying to do here is we're trying to eliminate the term spend down. We want that term to frankly just be gone. And that's exactly what this can provide. But what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the accounts, how they can help out an individual in their life no matter what type of benefit they might be receiving, whether it's Medicaid, Social Security, SNAP, Housing and Urban Development, but also get into how can the money be spent? How do we get money out of the account? How do we put money in the account? Essentially, we're going to touch anything and everything about the account so that when we're done here, you all can do my job later on. So that'd be awesome. But I want to start off by saying that this started all the way back in 2004 with families sitting around a dinner table wondering how they could affordably save for their child's future and still have them be able to keep their own benefits. Because when we think about other options, possibly a special needs trust, that those options can get expensive as time progresses. But something was wanted to where it was affordable for families. And so that's where Achieving a Better Life Experience, or the ABLE plan, was born. And so it took a decade of lobbying at the federal level, but in 2014 it was finally passed. And once it was passed in 2014, the main goal of the account was, again, to make sure that the money in the account was safe for individuals, and so that it could be spent on the things that they need. But also, since this came around in 2014, in regards to other financial accounts, like a 529 plan, like a checking or savings account, these other types of accounts have been around for a lot longer. And so what we were able to do is we were able to take some of the best parts from each of these accounts and put them all together. And so before I'm done here today, you'll see how a stable account can be a mixture of a 529 plan, a checking, a savings account, a special needs trust, all different types of financial accounts rolled into one for individuals. Now, we launched our plan back in 2016, and we're proud to be the first plan in the nation to have launched, but we're also the biggest. In fact, last week we just hit 10,000 accounts. So in 2.5 years, we were able to have over 10,000 individuals enroll and have a stable account, and also that about 4,500 of those individuals are here in Ohio. We have people in all 50 states using stable accounts, and within that time period, we were able to see that that's not just 10,000 individuals, that's also 10,000 families that are able to help save for their loved one. Again, the main benefit of the account is that the money in the accounts cannot count towards any resource limit that they might be receiving. Another benefit that I always like to make sure that I point to is ownership. The individual with the disability or the beneficiary can open and administer their own stable account. Now, maybe somebody's a minor, or maybe somebody might not want to, and there are other types of individuals that can help out with that process, and I'll get into those a little bit later. But coming along with that new opportunity of ownership also gives a new opportunity of financial independence for individuals, because in a lot of cases, whether it was an investment type of account or a retirement type of account similar to a 401k, that these could be considered countable resources depending upon what benefit an individual was receiving. And so we've seen stable account be able to fill both of those roles while still not being a countable resource. And the final one is tax benefits. And so while tax benefits might not be the most fun thing to talk about, we always like to remind people, and especially families, that anybody can put money into a stable account. So whether it's parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, co-workers, friends, anybody and everybody can contribute into the account. But everybody that does contribute into the account can take advantage of a state tax deduction here in Ohio. And so currently that's up to $4,000 that they contribute. Are there any questions so far? Yes.
If somebody say, let's just say grandpa puts in $1,000 into that, and does let's just call him Bill.
Sure.
Does he have to claim that as a income?
No. No, so what the stable accounts will do is that it does not force anybody to begin to file taxes or report it. If they weren't before, then...
taxes, I mean for...
No, it is not considered
Because
income.
I was told one time, if he don't have any money, and I help him out, then he's supposed to list that as income.
Not with a stable account.
Okay.
No, so this is that perfect place where it allows for families to be able to contribute for whatever occasion it might be, but still have that money protected. For Billy.
For what?
For Billy.
Oh,
You-
I thought you said billing.
Oh, no. Now, on our website is where everything is done, and that's stableaccount.com. But also on our website, we have an eligibility quiz. And this is a great tool for professionals along with families, in the sense that for people that might not get to hear our presentation or might want to remember to make sure that somebody's eligible, that on our website we have an eligibility quiz. And so it only takes about 2 minutes. It's all yes or no questions, and it immediately answers for families whether somebody is eligible to have an account. And the reason why the quiz doesn't take very long is because there are only 3 eligibility requirements for an individual. The first is that they can't already have an account. There is a limit of 1 per person. The second is that the individual's disability must have occurred or onset before the age of 26. But that doesn't mean that people have to be below the age of 26 to have a stable account. Because last year we had a 93-year-old enroll in a stable account and open up a stable account. And so while they were clearly over the age of 26, they were able to state that they still fit that second rule. Now can also go along the line for parents, in the sense that there is no age minimum. So we have parents that open this up for their infant children, but then we also have transition age individuals, adults, as well as I mentioned, 93-year-olds using the program. Now, the third rule for eligibility is that they have to meet one of these next 3 criteria that I'm going to mention. It's only one, not all 3. But the first is that an individual is receiving SSI or SSDI, or even just eligible to receive either of those, and they might not be. The second is that if an individual has a condition that's on the list of compassionate allowances, this is something that Social Security puts out every year, but it's something that they use as a determination for their own benefits. The third rule is really, it opens up the door for so many more individuals to be able to enroll, because maybe somebody's not receiving Social Security, or maybe somebody has a temporary disability. And so that's where an individual can use self-certification to fit that third qualification, that third eligibility requirement. And what self-certification is an individual stating that they have a doctor's diagnosis that they fit the first 2 rules, but also in order to fit the third, that they have a condition that will last up to or longer than a year, but also is a functional limitation. And so one of the examples that I like to give is that we have about 30% of the individuals enrolled using self-certification, but also it's because maybe somebody was in a car accident and that's a temporary disability, but their physical therapy is going to take a year and a half, and they're out of work for that time. And so this allows for people to still be able to save before they're able to go back to work. Are there any questions regarding this? And if anybody has any questions at any time, please feel free to just let me know.
Okay.
Yes.
Go back one. That middle one right there.
Yes.
List of compassion allowances.
Yes.
What's that mean? Repeat that.
So the list of compassionate allowances it's something that the Social Security Administration at the federal level, it's a list of about 150 to 160 different conditions that they use for their own determination. But when this was put in place as federal law, that they also used something similar to be able to let individuals be eligible for a stable account as well. But again, that doesn't mean that people have to have a condition that's on this list, because as long as they meet one of these three criteria, it's just one of the three criteria, so they can utilize two of the other ones as well if they choose. Did that answer your question?
I would think that most people that go after this would have easily one, two, or three of them.
Well, many of the individuals that are enrolled are receiving benefits from Social Security. Yes.
Is there any effect on whether they can receive this if they have resources, say in another type of, like an unpaid payback, pool trust?
No, so it does not matter where an individual or that the family has money previously, whether it's a first party, third party, family trust, anything like that, that this is in their name and for them. But we've also seen, and I'll touch on a little bit towards the end, about how people can take money from those trusts and put them into a stable account. And I'll kind of give the pros and cons to utilizing both, because one thing that we've noticed is that since trusts and other types of financial accounts have been around longer, that people are utilizing them already as well. And so we want to make sure that these can be used in conjunction and by as many people as possible. But yes, you're exactly correct. Now, enrollment is done completely online at our website, but what's great about that is that it's made the process completely free. So there is no cost to enrollment. Now, there is a $50 opening deposit, but I always make sure that I stress to people that that is not a fee. All that does is just create an opening balance in the account. Now, at the very beginning, I also mentioned that ownership was one of the key benefits to having a stable account, in the sense that the beneficiary could open and administer their own account. But let's say an individual may be a minor, or they may not be able to, and at that case in point, that's where an ALR can step in. Well, what is an ALR? It's an authorized legal representative. And those types of individuals are the people that can step in and become the administrator of the account. And so there are three types of people that fit an ALR category. That's a parent, and that's a guardian, and that's a power of attorney. Now, let's say somebody doesn't fit that bill exactly. Let's say maybe somebody's a rep payee for an individual, and they handle a lot of finances already, and they want to be able to do this as well. Well, we have a solution to that, in the sense that on our website is a limited power of attorney form, and that's where individuals that want to become the ALR can print that off and fill it out and get it notarized, and they can become the ALR for an individual. Now, let's say an individual has an ALR, let's say a parent has set up the account. That parent is the one that is in charge of spending out of the account and administering the account as well. So they would be the ones making the decisions with how the money in the account is spent. Yes, sir.
Do you use different financial institutions to deposit the money, or does it go into the fund special for this program?
I will get to it in just. I thought you had me. I love it when people put the ball on the tee for me. But we use Vanguard to invest the funds, and so that's where the money would be held as well. Now, I wanted to make sure that I finished everything here, but there are two ways that oh, yes, sir.
You transfer the account from the parent to the individual at a later date then? Like if they're underage now, and then when they become an adult, is that an easy process?
Yes, and so what that process would look like is when a parent establishes the account, that the account's always in that individual or the beneficiary's name, but that parent's information as the ALR is just attached to it. And so what would happen is, let's say an individual turns 18 and they want to be the owner, operator of their stable account, that there's something called a change of ALR. And it's essentially saying that instead of having an ALR, I'm now my own ALR. And we've seen that happen. All that is just giving our office a call, and we'll send the form out for that as well.
Thank you.
Of course. And so if there is an ALR in the process, let's say a parent, that when the enrollment process happens, all that is just filling out a little bit more information. Just a little bit more information about who that ALR would be. Now, there are two ways to get money into the account, and that is electronically or with a check. And one great thing that we've seen utilized is people connecting a checking account or a savings account to the stable account, and that's a great way that recurring payments can just be placed into the account as well. At whatever interval that person may choose. Now, there are 3 numbers when it comes to the stable account that I like to make people aware of. The first is an annual contribution limit, and this is $15,000. So from January 1st to December 31st, anybody that contributes into the account can contribute up to that $15,000 for somebody. Now, once January 1st hits, is that everybody has a clean slate and can build upon what they put into the account in previous years. Now, let's say somebody opens up their account in June, it still follows the same rule that they have up until December 31st to put in that $15,000, and they'll get that clean slate in January as well. Now, one thing that happened last year in 2018 was what's called the Able to Work Act. And what the Able to Work Act allowed for people to do is it said, if you're the beneficiary, if you're the individual, and you're employed, that you now have the opportunity to contribute more money into your stable account. And so that number goes from $15,000 to over $27,000. And what individuals are allowed to do is they're able to now bridge that gap with their own wages. So people that are working and have income and they want to be able to save their money, they're able to do so here as well. And we've seen people utilize payroll deduction, and that's been an extremely successful process. Now, the third number I always want to make people aware of is the lifetime balance limit. And so currently that's sitting at $462,000. It's a lot of money. But given account contribution limits, so with that annual limit, people won't hit that for about 37, 38 years. Now, this also follows the College Savings 529 plans rule here in Ohio. And so that continues to go up and up and up and up. And within the 2.5 years that we've been doing this, it's already jumped over $45,000. And so whenever it moves, ours does as well. Are there any questions regarding this? Yes?
What if you have a young man in, who's in for, let's say, 12 years, and you decide you don't, you just take your money out and you're done?
Well, so what would happen is, if somebody wants to close an account, there are no fees for closing the account. But the one thing that we want to make people aware of is that once they, or I not make people aware of, more so remind people, is that if they take that money out, that once it's left the stable account, that it's now a countable resource. So if somebody's still receiving benefits, that instead of just closing it and taking the money out in bulk, they might still want to spend the money through the account before they close it.
And you can get your SSI
For a very long time, yes.
So they do direct deposits, you said, like from employers?
Oh,
or
yes.
From the SSI checks?
Not from SSI, but from employers. And also from any other type of financial account. So trusts directly deposit into the stable account as well. And we covered all of this already. But, so e-gift events. This is a feature that the stable accounts can provide, but what I like to describe it as is an educational tool, especially for families. And what this can do is this is something that's generated from the account that can send an email out to whomever an individual chooses stating that this is a new opportunity for them to be able to save and still keep their benefits. And so this is a great tool that families can use, whether it's the holidays, graduations, birthdays, anything like that. But we've also seen this also used as a GoFundMe type of tool, because there was an older gentleman who needed hearing aids, but Medicaid had left him with a $4,000 out-of-pocket payment for those hearing aids. $4,000 is a lot of money. But what he was able to do is use this e-gift feature and send an email out to all of his friends stating his situation and asking for help. And so his friends were able to help drive down the cost as well.
Did you opt out of that?
Well, this is completely optional, so people don't, it just comes along with the account, but it's not something that somebody has to use. Now, when it comes, oh yes, my apologies.
What if they don't work, it's just SSI,
If-
and they save from it?
If an individual doesn't work, then they would still just have that $15,000 annual contribution limit. It would not be the $27,000. But one thing that we always have seen that's been successful is, let's say somebody's receiving $750 in their SSI check every month, but they're not using all of that for whatever reason. Maybe there's $50, $100 that they're not using. That money can be placed into a stable account, and it still cannot count towards their annual benefits analysis, because once a year everybody has that benefits analysis, and just because the money went into a stable account, it still won't count against them. They can't say, well, you put $50 every month from your check into a stable account. It's considered a qualified distribution by federal law, and so that's one thing that individuals and their families are able to do as well. Investment options, as I mentioned earlier, that if the money is invested, which is completely optional, that the money is going to be invested with Vanguard, and there are 4 different types of mutual funds. Now, the 5th option is what's called a bank safe account, and this just acts as a checking account, so it won't grow any earnings, but it's FDIC insured and it's protected. Now, if somebody chooses to invest, then they are more than welcome to do so. It is optional. It's nothing that's forced as well, but there are 4 different mutual funds that people can take advantage of as well. Yes, sir.
Subject to tax, the earnings, investment earnings?
The earnings are not subject to tax, so all of the funds that come into the account, whether it's through somebody's wages or from an outside source, those dollars have already been taxed, and so those are post-tax dollars, and so the money that is coming out of the account for expenditures, and if maybe let's say somebody's spending from the account and part of those dollars were invested and earned, that those are not taxable. Those are not taxed when they're withdrawn or when they're being out. I appreciate you asking that. Now, when it comes to spending the funds, this is one of my favorite slides, because I get questions about how can the money be spent almost daily. And so what happens is when money comes out of the account, it needs to be spent on a QDE, or a qualified disability expense. And what that is it is anything that relates to the individual and their disability, and then helps to maintain or improve health, independence, or quality of life. That's pretty broad, but that's incredible. The reason why that's so amazing is because a stable account is not a cookie cutter type of account, because everybody's individual's needs are different. And so this is why this is able to meet all of those needs. But also, let's say that this account is open for a young child. Their needs as they continue to grow are also going to change. And so this account and the needs that it can help pay for are also making sure that they're covered as well. Now, things that are always considered a QDE, housing and rent, basic living expenses like going to the grocery store, these are things that a special needs trust does not cover. And the reason why a special needs trust doesn't cover it is because SSI is supposed to pay for it. But let's say somebody's not receiving SSI, or they don't have a special needs trust, these things can still be paid for even if they do have those as well. And there's also things such as transportation or education, and we also have the ability to where people can roll over a 529 plan into their stable account, And what that allows for people to do is that money can still be spent on education, but it also opens up the spending power of that money as well. So it can be spent on more than just tuition or school supplies as well. And when I give these broad categories like transportation, it's not just a car payment. It's, well, the car needs gas, or the individual needs insurance to drive, or maybe an individual can't drive and they have to utilize transportation services, or even Uber, Lyft, any of these types of transportation options that an individual has can be paid for using the stable account. Yes, sir.
Do they have debit cards to access the funds?
See, I planted him in the audience tonight because that is just beautiful. There are 3 ways, thank you, sir. No, this is perfect. There are 3 ways to spend out of the stable account, and a debit card is one of them. And so the first way is utilizing a checking or savings account, because I mentioned earlier that connecting a checking or savings account with the stable is a great way to begin recurring payments, or even just put money in as somebody chooses to do so. But that's also a way that money can come out of the account as well. The second way is utilizing a third-party check. And so what this means is that once an individual opens up a stable account, they don't have a checkbook. Yes, sir?
Yeah, you mentioned a savings account with that. Does that work like they do with PayPal? Like you could take that money and then send it in to the stable account from a savings account? Or?
So it's just an electronic funds transfer. So it would be like transferring money from any other one financial account to any other financial account as
Okay,
well.
all right. So you can get out the money that way, or?
Yes. Yes, that is one way to get the money out.
Okay, all right.
Do they charge you a fee to do that?
There is no transfer fund fees. And there's also no fees to use the check or the card. We've decided to eat those charges. Now, when it comes to the third-party check, people don't get a physical checkbook when they open up a stable account. But they still have the opportunity to send checks to people. And so the example that I always give is rent. Because let's say somebody has to pay rent. Well, they can utilize the third-party check option by going online to their account and filling out a virtual check. And once that information is submitted, it actually comes to our office in Columbus. We write a physical check and mail it for them. And so what we always tend to ask is, if people are going to utilize this, to just keep in mind how long it may take for the mailing process to occur. Now, when it comes to the stable card, this is the real way that a stable account can be used on an everyday type basis. Because this is a loadable debit card. And it's actually a Visa card, so it's accepted anywhere Visa is, and it comes along with the same securities, fraud protections that Visa comes along with, but also it's loadable. And so what I mean by loadable is that if this is optional, but if somebody chooses to use this, that it comes with $0 on it. And that's because people need to load funds from the account onto the card. And so let's say somebody has $1,000 in their account, but they put $50 onto the card. Well, once that card has $50 on it, it doesn't know about the other 950. I really hope my mental math is right on that one. But at that point in time, it only knows the $50, so it won't spend what it doesn't have. And that's more along the lines of a security feature, because let's say a parent is building up the assets in this account for years and years and years, that a debit card that might get lost or might get stolen, it has a lot of money on it, would want to be something that people would avoid. Now, on top of that, there is no cash access with the card. So the card cannot be used at ATMs. It also can't be used at point of sale transactions. So if somebody is at Walmart or at Kroger or Acme, they can't swipe the card when they're getting groceries and say, oh, well, I'd like $3,000 cash back. Well, I'm at it, why not? That is not able to occur. Tracking expenses, the stable account tracks all deposits and withdrawals for the lifetime of the account. Now, one feature that we recently added, and the reason why is we got a lot of questions from parents and guardians about record keeping very specific items. And so what we've allowed for people to do is just take a picture of their receipt, and it can attach to that one line item. Because when people log on to their account, it looks very similar to an online banking account. It says when the money was spent, where it was spent, how much was spent, but then there's also that opportunity to where people can attach that picture to it as well of their receipt. Are there any questions about this as well? Yes, sir.
You said you can't use the loadable card for point of sale.
No, so there's no cash access. They can be
No
taken.
cash in.
Right.
Yes, my apologies. Did I miss? Yes.
If an individual can only put $25 away a month, and then the washing machine goes out in her group home, and she wants to purchase another washing machine for the group home, is that an acceptable expense?
So when we talk about and I'm surprised I didn't get the usual vacation question. Usually vacation is what people tee off with, but when it comes to expenditures, all we want to make sure that people are doing is saying, does it fit that qualified expense rule? But this is also the purpose of a stable account, to be able to save for that rainy day, because that can fall under assisted technology, it can fall under housing and maintenance, and any of those multiple categories. But a washing and dryer, they most certainly help maintain quality of life, health as well.
Okay, good, because not everybody has spend down. Their expenses take up almost everything, but $25 a month would be a nice way to have a nest egg.
Yes.
Second question, you're talking about receipts. How does it work? You ask to have this happen, and then you put the money. I mean,
As to
what's
what
the?
happens.
I mean,
sorry.
say a parent wanted to request money to do something for their child
Yes.
through this account.
There is
How
no.
do we get you the receipt? Does that come after everything's done? We send you a picture of the receipt? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so that is completely optional. People do not have to do that. And there's also no request process for the money. This is different than a special needs trust where you have to go with a specific plan and specific expenses. When people have money in the account, they can spend it when they need it. That's that everyday type of feature that this can provide. And so people don't have to provide receipts, or we provided the option for people to attach receipts to that specific line item for their own personal prerogatives. So if somebody wants to do that instead of keeping receipts on hand or whatever record keeping process might have been, that we can handle record keeping for you. Yes, ma'am.
So, can you purchase anything, or how do you know if you're rejected? I mean, how do you know if you make an expenditure, it doesn't fall under this large general umbrella?
Well, so that's a wonderful question. Now, when it comes to expenditures, we are not looking over what the account may be spent on. But the one entity that can overlook that is the IRS. And that's because these are federal accounts. And so they have the opportunity, if they so choose, to audit an account. Now, we have not had an account be audited yet, and we know that it will happen in the future. And so I appreciate that question, because it can happen to people, but also we've gotten people that ask, will it happen more frequently with these types of accounts? No, of course not. Every account has the exact same type of being audited as my checking or savings or any other type of account. Did that answer? Okay. Yes, sir.
You have an ALR in charge of the account and they die, so what happens? There's nobody else. It's just that ALR and that individual.
Well, so at that point in time, that would be the probate court's decision, because the probate court is going to make a lot of those choices, and so they can now, if somebody in their estate plan or their will said, I would like so and so to become the next ALR of this account, they can definitely do that, and that'll provide a great guidance for the probate court when the will is being reviewed to take that into account.
There's not a vehicle within the account itself to do that. It would have to be done through
It can be done when an individual is alive, but once an ALR passes away, that's when it's the probate court's decision.
You can't have something I'm sorry, you can't have something internally in that account
There is
saying
no-
in the event of my death, it reverts to so-and-so, that would have to be appropriate.
Within the stable account itself, there is no naming of a beneficiary, but that's also why we encourage that to happen in the estate plan as well. Did I miss it? Okay.
I do have two questions.
Yes.
Is there a trial period? If you sign up tomorrow, and you decide in 6 weeks you're not going to do it,
Well, there is no trial period. People can choose to open the account whenever they please or close the account whenever they please as well.
And the second one, say your son is in it for 6 years, 7 years, and he has $1,400 saved in there. Does he get any interest on that?
Well, if an individual decides, so that would be, the question was, if somebody has money invested, will it gain interest? Well, that's based on what the accounts that they choose to put their money into. So if they choose to put their money in some of the investment accounts or part of their money in the investment
You
accounts.
see that on like a
Yes.
thing, that interest?
So there are two places that would show up when an individual garners interest. First, it would be where you see the deposits and withdrawals, because it would look like a new deposit, and just
Yeah.
the note would include that it was earnings from the investment account such and such. But it would also show up during the quarterly statements, because every individual gets a quarterly statement from the account, and it would say how much of their total has been interest earned, if any.
So if you invest the right way, you're gonna get something back on some of your.
We hope so. Frankly, what
Because a lot of these people are gonna put an X amount of money in, and it's gonna sit there for years.
And we know that a lot of parents are going to be putting this money away and not touching it for a long time, but that is whatever the market dictates. So we have not had any losses yet, but I cannot
See, I
control
tried
that.
to protect some of my son's money, I have 2 of them, actually 3, but 2 that I'm guarding for, and I put it in a burial fund. But if you've got a trouble next time, you can't get it out.
But that's something where people can access the money when they choose to. Yes, sir.
I know you have traditional history of return on Vanguard stuff, right? It's not guaranteed, but normally it's better than earnings.
To garner interest? Oh, yes, yes. Now, while we haven't experienced any losses, we can't make any promises
Right.
with that as well. But that's also why we make people aware that that bank safe option or that savings account option, it's already defaultly selected for people. That's FDIC insured and protected, so if people choose to invest the money, that is their choice that they want to do so. We are not forcing anybody to invest the money. Did I mention, or yes?
What happens if the child or the adult passes away?
Well, just a couple slides, but I
Okay,
promise
we
I
don't
will
wait,
get on
all right.
that.
Can it be a joint account? Can you have like both parents as ALRs?
No, there is only one ALR per account.
The low balances, so does it need, the account need to hold a minimum?
No, and are you referring to the alerts portion? So the last thing here is that the stable accounts can provide alerts, and so it's text alerts, and what this is if a parent or ALR wants to receive text message notifications, that they can receive a text every time the card is spent. So if somebody says they're going out to dinner, they also go to dinner and a movie, parents or ALR is going to find out. Now, along with that is that they can also set up a low balance on the card. So let's say somebody puts $50 on the card, but they want to be notified when there's only $5 or $10 left on the card, that is what that is referring to. And there is no minimum balance, there is no low balance fee, none of those types of charges. Okay, I think we covered. So the next couple slides I'm going to be talking about is how benefits are affected with the stable account, and then we'll also roll right into your question as well, because that is the slide directly after this one. So this slide only pertains to people that are receiving SSI. So if they're receiving SSDI, Medicaid, SNAP, this does not apply to you. This only applies to individuals who are receiving SSI. The first is that at the federal level, Social Security said that if somebody has over $100,000 in their stable account, which we won't see that for at least 2 more years if somebody's just maxing out their account. But if that happens, then their SSI benefits would be suspended. So they would still be enrolled, they would still be eligible, they just would not receive any until that balance goes back below $100,000. And their reasoning for that is that SSI is meant to cover housing and food. And their reasoning was that if somebody has $100,000 in a stable account, then they can adequately do that for 1 month. But this also allows for people to be able to take advantage of other different types of financial accounts, because a special needs trust can hold all that money, and that SSI rule goes away. The second rule is it's something that I mentioned earlier, but I just kind of want to echo it, is that the stable account is the shield, and that when money leaves the shield, that it can become a countable resource. So let's say somebody takes $200 from their stable account and just puts it in their checking account, and it's just sitting there, that it can become a countable resource. It's left the stable account, so it's left the shield, and so it can become a countable resource. And so that's more along the line, not a rule, but just a consideration. And the third, number 3, is that if an individual is employed and SSI, Social Security, has put wage restrictions or income restrictions on an individual, those rules still apply, because that's a Social Security rule and not a stable account rule. That would happen whether they're receiving or whether they have a stable account or not. Now, I'm able to answer your question finally, and that is, once an account holder passes away, is that the administrator of the estate would contact us, and we can provide them temporary access of the account to spend on things like funeral and burial expenses, any bills that an individual might have at the end of their life. Now, you'll also notice here that there is no designated transfer upon death. So this is also similar to there cannot be a beneficiary named on the account. And so this is why we always encourage estate planning, in the sense that now an individual and their loved ones are able to accumulate many more assets than they could have before. And so saying where they want that to go can be important, and people would want to do that. Because let's say an individual doesn't have a will or an estate plan, that once they pass away, the stable account, along with the rest of their estate, would go through the probate court. So this is just also something to consider, because if an individual passes away without a will, whether they have a stable account or not, then it's going to be the probate court's decision as to what happens with the contents of their estate. Yes?
So if you have a special needs trust.
Yes.
The state considers, for example, I have a daughter, she has a special needs trust. Any money in that we can use for whatever's approved, but upon her death, the balance of that special needs trust goes to the state.
Do you have a first-party trust, or what's called a Medicaid payback trust?
It's an irrevocable special needs trust.
Okay. That is something very similar to what I'm mentioning.
Okay.
But so there's something called a first-party trust.
Okay.
And what a first-party trust does is it is in that individual's name. So once an individual passes away, if they are receiving Medicaid, then Medicaid can ask for the funds that they've given to an individual over their life. With a third-party trust, it's in a third party's name, not that individual's. So Medicaid cannot ask for any of those funds. But I will also dovetail it, because I think I know exactly what you're asking, if the same thing is applicable here. Well, no and yes, in a sense. And what I mean by that is stable accounts are right in between those two. And I'm going to explain it a little bit here. And this is something to note, that this is something that's applicable for individuals whether they have a stable account or not. That Medicaid payback is something that can happen. But a lot of times we are the first people to let people know about it. But I'm happy to let you all know how it affects a stable account. So once an individual passes away, there are a couple of rules if they were even receiving Medicaid. If they're not receiving Medicaid, this does not apply to them. But if an individual is receiving Medicaid, then what's going to happen is if they choose to, Medicaid would put a claim in to receive the funds that they've given to an individual over their life, so they're going to be asking for services rendered. But what stable accounts do is we say, whoa, you need to meet a few requirements first. The first is that there needs to be some overlap of funds. And what I mean by that is Medicaid can only ask from this account anything while they were receiving Medicaid but also had a stable account open. So the two have to be occurring at the same time. Now, we've denied Medicaid because somebody was receiving Medicaid a decade ago, but they weren't receiving Medicaid when they had a stable account. And that actually happened all the way out in California. But nevertheless, that there needs to be some overlap. On top of that, this needs to occur once an individual is 55 and above. Now, if an overlap amount is found, then what's going to happen is all funeral and burial expenses can be paid off. Any outstanding bills that an individual has can all be paid off. And also, let's say somebody's buying into Medicaid, that all those buy-ins are added up and subtracted again from that overlap total. So we're just chipping away. And so the point of this is that it's not leaving an individual's family in any sort of debt. So the stable account is allowed to pay for all of those things instead of letting the government get its first draw. Does that make sense? Am I okay? Are there any questions regarding this process?
This isn't according to this, but you tell me if we don't do this, my son is on Medicaid now, he dies tomorrow, Medicaid's gonna come back in and make its way?
Well, so it would make a claim on the individual's estate for however much they've given to an individual over their lifetime.
I didn't know that.
And so they'll come after, or they will ask for everything that is in that individual's name. So that first party, that's where that first party comes and is tied back into things, in the sense that whether it's a checking or savings account or a piece of property in their name, anything like that.
For all Medicaid.
Yes. And so it's seen as, or at least from here, as stable accounts, that the money in a stable account is meant for an individual. It's meant for their quality of life, not necessarily a wealth or generational handing down wealth building tool. But that's also where other things can come into play. And I'm going to skip a slide here to talk about the special needs trusts and answer questions about that. But a special needs trust and a stable account can work so well together because a trust can be amended so that money can come from the trust and be placed into the stable account. And at that point in time, once it's in a stable account, it has so much more broader spending power. So we can think about not having to ask permission to spend the money, or being able to actually spend the money on housing and food. These are things that people want to do on an everyday basis, and now they can once that money comes from a trust and is placed into their stable account. Now, we've also seen it vice versa as well, to where somebody has a lot of money and they need to shelter it, and so they use some of the funds in their stable account to open up a trust. Are there any questions regarding that? Okay, perfect. Oh, yes.
Special needs trust is different than a community.
CMF.
Community fund management.
That's cool, and I don't think I'm going to.
Well, so, are you, is that with CFMF?
Yes.
Yes, we were, and actually I co-present with CFMF on many occasions. They've set up amendments from those trusts to go into a stable account, so that is possible with a CFMF account.
What's
as well.
CFM?
So it's called Community Fund Management Foundation, and that's just one of the organizations here in Ohio that operate a pooled trust, and that's another type of trust that an individual can have as well. And so there are many types of trusts that individuals can utilize. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on is there is a cost to the program, and that's $2.50 a month, or in total, $30 per year. Now, we also want to mention that this cost is going to continue to get lower and lower, because when we first started, it was about $5 a month. And so the more people that we enroll, the lower the cost gets for everybody. This is a not-for-profit program. And the last thing that I wanted to point out is our customer service line. And so what I really love about our customer service team and our team is that when you call that number, is that somebody picks up on the other side. It's not press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It just takes you right to one of our team members, and we can help answer any questions whatsoever. Now, a person.
We want it.
Now, stableaccount.com, again, is where everything is done, whether it's the eligibility quiz, opening the account, but it's also where all of this information is as well. This PowerPoint slide is up there. Any of the brochures that you have, anything that I bring to a presentation is always online, and even much more is online as well. So I always recommend perusing the website, taking a look at the website, seeing some more of the benefits that the accounts can provide. But also, I have my business cards as well, so if anybody has questions, you're more than welcome to call me, email me for whatever questions you might have about the stable accounts. I'm happy to help out as well. But lastly, I wanted to thank you all for taking some time out of your night to listen and to be here tonight. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week and evening. So thank you.